Nice to see you. Tonight is going to be a question and answer period. Questions have already been submitted. They're questions that have come out of the question box, which I very much appreciate these questions. I think they're really valuable. And the primary question we're going to talk about tonight deals with the resurrection. Question comes with this in particular. When Christ comes back, will we be resurrected in a body and spirit like Jesus was? So obviously, when we read of in Luke 24 and other passages, we see Jesus raising from the dead. We see him appearing in a physical body, and we would call it that, a body that appears just like the body that he was raised in. So the question then is very important because when we talk about resurrection, we're trying to imagine what does God actually teach for us when we raise. Is it going to be like the same way that Jesus was raised? And there's a number of nuances to this because people have different ideas of what the resurrection really is and what it means to be resurrected. In fact, I found that there's a lot of Christians who have differences on what it means to actually be resurrected from the dead. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about Jesus, his resurrection as well. So the first question I think we should start with is, well, what body did Jesus have after he was raised? What did he raise as? What was that? And I would suggest that we just look over at Luke 24 and verse 39. That particular text, you will notice the shock that the disciples had when he appears to them. And you might remember he does not open a door and walk in. He actually just appears in the room where they are. So let's look at this context in Luke 24 and look down here beginning at verse 36. As they were talking, we know from John's account the doors were locked here. As they were talking about these things, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace to you." Now you might be aware that just before this is when he was walking on the road to Emmaus with the two, and that would be about a 2 to 3 hour walk. And then he ate with them, and then he vanished, and they ran back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples, and as they're telling him, he appears there. I dare say he didn't walk. He just didn't bother. So he then appears. Verse 37, but they were startled and frightened and thought they saw a spirit. All right, let's just stop right there. This is class time, by the way. Let's stop right there and let's ask the first question then about this. When they say they thought they saw a spirit, can you think of other places in the New Testament where somebody thought they saw a spirit? All right, when Jesus was walking on the water, they were frightened and thought they saw a spirit. If you're reading the King James Version, what would it say? They thought they saw a ghost. Okay? All right. That's actually, for our vernacular, is not a bad translation. It's just like, woohoo! What is that? Can you think of another example?
When Peter and John were in prison and the servant girls saw them when they were released?
Yeah. Peter comes to, it was just Peter who was in prison. Yeah. And Peter comes to John's house, though, his mother's house. And he's knocking on the door, and Rhoda comes to the door and hears him, and she goes back and says, "Peter's here," and they go, "Nah, it must be his angel," in some translations, or spirit, or something like that. All right, so when you think about that, what would you What would you imagine is in their mind? What are they actually saying when they think they're startled and they think they're seeing a spirit when Jesus appears? Pardon?
They had physically gone forever.
Then what do they see? Yeah, he's dead, he's physically gone forever, and so what do they think they're seeing? Just kind of, yeah, just like some of those movies.
We've all seen a Christmas.
We've all seen is it Christmas Story? I don't know. Yeah.
No. Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the Christmas Carol. There we are. You got me confused for a minute. I thought we were talking about BB guns for a second. You know? My kids asked me for a BB gun. I don't know how many years. I said, "You'll shoot your eye out. You can't have it." At any rate, so yeah, they think they're just seeing a ghost, an apparition, some representation of him. Some would say that they thought they were seeing his angel. Those were the type of things that would be in their minds. All right, now I'm drawing the differentiation here because if they saw his spirit, have they now believed that he was raised from the dead? Seeing his spirit, did that mean they believed he had been raised from the dead? No, absolutely not.
Because that's what they're afraid.
Yeah, this is not a resurrection. If they just see his spirit, if that were possible, if that actually were happening, which obviously the Jews believed that could happen, but seeing his spirit did not mean they were raised from the dead, or that Jesus was raised from the dead. That's not, in fact, he has to correct them. You'll notice that then in the next verse, verse 38. And he said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." Jesus now basically reprimands them or corrects them. Mark's account says he rebukes them, but corrects them for thinking that they're just seeing a spirit, and instead says, "Look, I'm not a spirit. This is me. This is my body. You can look at my hands and my feet. It's the body they nailed to the cross. I'm raised from the dead. Here I am." And of course, at this point, they've been told a number of times that he raised, and they haven't believed. The women came and told him. The two from Emmaus have been just telling him that they saw him, but when he appears, they're still doubting this and think that it's just a spirit. And so Jesus corrects them. A spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see me have. All right, so the question then, I think, should come out of this particular text. When Christ comes back, will we be resurrected in a body and spirit like his? Now, I know some and have talked to Christians in other places at times in which they said, yes, absolutely, just like you see. In fact, I just read this in John MacArthur taught this in the commentary he wrote. I just read this in a commentary. He said, this is exactly the way we're going to be raised, and he is still in the flesh, but it is a glorified flesh, and that's why he can go through locked doors and zap hundreds of miles if he wants to, or whatever. It's just a body, and that's what we're going to be. You know, Adam's going to look like Adam. I'm going to look like me, and I'm hoping it's more like, I don't know, what age would I want? Not this one. But this one keeps scaring me when I look in the mirror. So let's not do that one. But anyway, just pretty much the same person. That's why, when we get there, we don't need name tags. We're going to recognize each other. The people who we never met will all have to have name tags, I guess, but something like that. At any rate, that is a common belief, and I've talked to Christians who believe that, etc. So let's indulge ourselves a little bit on this, and I think I've mentioned this somewhat before in other lessons. But look at 1 John chapter 3 and verse 2, and I want to see your conclusion from this. 1 John 3 and verse 2. So John says, let's read verse 1 and 2. John says, "See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure." Okay, so what's John say in verse 2? Well, we don't know yet what we will be, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. What conclusion can you draw from that as what kind of body we're going to have? Is it going to be like the body that Peter, Andrew, James, John, and all the apostles saw when he raised back there in Luke 24?
No, because it says that body already is.
Yeah. So John's the one that's writing this. John obviously saw Jesus' body when he raised. And in fact, in 1 John 1, verse 1 and 2, he says, we touched him, we handled him, we heard him, all of those things, the word of life. So it's quite obvious that the body that he appears in Luke 24, is his resurrected body without doubt. But it isn't the body that will be. Because John said, we don't know what that is. And John saw that body. So if it was the glorified body, and this is where you'd have an argument with John MacArthur, if you saw the glorified body, if John saw the glorified body, he'd say, I know exactly what it looks like, I saw it. And we're going to have a body like that. But that's not what he says. He says, we don't know what it is, even though he saw that glorified body, the body of Jesus when it raised. Everybody following that, or you have a question? That makes sense? All right. So there is this future where we're the children of God, but not yet come to the point where God has given us this glorified body, this eternal body. Take a look in Philippians chapter 3, and Paul makes reference to this as well. Philippians 3, verse 20 and 21. So he's contrasting the Philippian Christians, some of whom are enemies of the cross because they are living according to this world. Their God is their belly, and their glory is in their shame, and they mind earthly things. But he says in verse 20, our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body by the power that enables him even to subject all things to himself. All right, so in that passage, he's emphasizing that our bodies are going to be transformed. And who's going to do it? He's going to transform this lowly body, and so that it will be like his glorious body, and then all things subjected to himself. So that transformation is take place. So my first conclusion then is, well, when Christ comes back, will we be resurrected in the body and spirit like Christ? If you're thinking about the body referred to, that he's on in that body he lived on earth with, or even that body that he was resurrected with, even though he could miraculously go through doors, etc. No, we're not going to be like that body. We're going to be like the body that he took on as a glorious body.
I guess I think the comparison to Christ as problematic to start with, given that he did things like that before he was resurrected.
Exactly.
So, the times when people were trying to push him off a cliff and he disappears,
Right.
he walks on water. We've got lots of examples of Christ in his body doing things prior to his death.
We couldn't do. That's right. And I totally agree with that. I think that's an excellent point. And it just doesn't seem that in this resurrected body in the 40 days after his resurrection, and his ascension, that resurrected body, he doesn't do anything that's really more amazing than anything that he had done before. Later on, when Philip teaches the eunuch, he's suddenly transported 10 miles away. So, of course, God did that, and he just moves him to another place. So anyway, the first thing we're talking about is there is a glorious body that Jesus has that no one has yet seen, and John says that, and yet when we see him, we will be able to see him as he is. So all the passages in the Bible that have said if you see God, you'll die. You can't see him face to face and not live. Suddenly now we'll be able to. And reason? Because we'll have a body like his. We won't be a flesh and blood body that is looking at a glorious body and get vaporized. That would make sense, all right? So far, so good. Well, that still begs the question, well, what is this resurrection then? What will that actually look like? What's the meaning of resurrection? And that's the next thing that is important. You will hear people talking about a bodily resurrection. And I'm going to suggest to you that it's pretty tough to talk about resurrection and not talk about a bodily resurrection. For example, Lazarus being raised from the dead. Let's see the context and how this is written for us in John chapter 11. John chapter 11, and notice beginning at verse 21 there, Martha comes to Jesus. Of course, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days by this point. Now, in the Jewish mind, he's not just dead, he's totally dead. So if you've seen Princess Bride, you'll understand that. He's at 3 days, he's just mostly dead. And on 4th day, he's dead. I say that a little bit in jest, but there was some truth to that. They believed that the spirit hovered over the body for 3 days. And I don't know if this is true or not, obviously, but that was the way they believed. And then when you hit the 3rd day, the spirit realized not coming back to life, and the spirit departs, and that's that. And the body is completely dead. So here we have then a picture of Jesus waiting till the 4th day. This would be especially impressive then to the Jews, that it's absolutely impossible now for him to come back to life. And he wanted to get that out. So Martha, anyway, verse 21. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." You can see a little hope in Martha's words. 23. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Now he's talking about, of course, eternally. "Do you believe this?" And she said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." So what would Martha be thinking if she's thinking about her brother being raised from the dead? She's just thinking about seeing him in some kind of spiritual form? No. She's thinking about he comes back to life. And when Jesus said, "I am the resurrection," she understands that yes, on the last day I know you're going to call him and he's going to come out of the tombs. In fact, in John 5, earlier in John, verse 27, 28, Jesus said, "The hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear the voice of the Son of Man, and they will come forth, some to a resurrection of life and some to a resurrection of condemnation." So those who are where? In the tombs will come forth. That's the picture that he gives. Now, if it was just, well, I'm going to call them down from heaven, then that would not be the same as a body raising from the dead. Let's now go from there and add one more passage in Acts 17. This is when Paul, of course, is giving his speech at the Areopagus before the Athenians. And when he gets to verse 30, he talks about, of course, he's been defeating the idea of idols. He says the times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world by righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Now, when they heard of the resurrection from the dead, some mocked, but others said, "We'll hear you again about this matter." The Greeks, what did they believe about life after death? Any life after death? You sure? The Egyptians used to pack the tomb with food and all this to send them on their way. The Greeks, they believed in angels and spirits and things like that, and they certainly believed in demons and etc. So I'd suggest to you, it's not that they didn't believe there was life after death. They didn't believe there was, even the emperor himself was going to go from being flesh and blood to being a deity. He was already a god, but that's the reason. He would go and he would be a deity in afterlife. Did they believe he was going to be raised from the dead? No. Resurrection was bodily. The body is raised from the dead. And that's why they went, oh, this is crazy. The body actually come back to life? Impossible. Where did the Corinthians live? Good, in Corinth. Yeah. And where was that? Good, in Greece. And where was that? Right near Athens. Okay. That's the flavor of what's going on then when we transfer over now to our primary text. We want to spend our rest of our time in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. This is where Paul, of course, some of the false teachers that had come into the Corinthian church were obviously teaching against the resurrection. And Paul has to spend a whole chapter on this. Now, before we read the text, the reason I put these 2 points here were, and this is just the rest of the outline, so you can have that before you while we look at this. But first of all, the reason for the text is the Corinthians have bought into this no resurrection. They've bought into we're living for now. Remember back in chapter 4 when Paul accused them of thinking they were reigning and that that's what the false teachers were teaching them. It's this life that you're looking for. It's this life that you're finding your glory, etc. What sect of the Jews believed that? Sadducees. And the Sadducees came out of the period of time when the Greeks invaded Antiochus Epiphanes in 170 BC, invaded Judah and Jerusalem, and pressured the Jews to believe in what the Greeks believed. So back to the same story again. And they were called, those who caved into that were called the Sadducees. All right, so that being said, we also notice that believing in a bodily resurrection, then, this is what Paul is concerned about, that if they don't believe in a bodily resurrection, they're not going to live right. Right? If you don't believe in a bodily resurrection and you're just living for glory now, then why would I suffer and sacrifice and give up my life and go through persecution? Why would I do any of those things? That doesn't make sense because I'm supposed to be living for now. So giving up their life would not happen. And that's very important for us today too, to understand that unless we give up our lives, we don't attain to what the actual goal is, the resurrection of the dead. Questions so far? Before we start 1 Corinthians 15. All right, so let's go back then to 15 verse 35. We won't take a whole lot of time here, but there'll be a few places we'll stop and look at. All right, so 15:35, but someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? Well, that's a really natural question, isn't it? Well, you mean we're going to be raised from the dead? Well, what body? Is it age 35, 29, 62? What, it'd be all those questions. What kind of body are they going to come from? This body hasn't been any fun. Why do I want to be raised again just to go through all this junk and die again? Pretty good question. Ask Lazarus. He'd probably say, well, yeah, the second time around wasn't a lot of fun either. All right, so verse 36. You foolish person, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And what you sow is not the body that is to be, but a bare kernel, perhaps of wheat or some other grain. But God gives it a body as he has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body. Now I suggest to you, verse 38 is the critical statement. How is this going to happen? If the body is raised, what kind of body is going to come from and all this? And he said, God is going to give it a body. God's power is how this is going to happen. It's not going to be just helter-skelter, raised from the dead, and you get potluck, of what kind of body you're going to have. God's going to give a body that he has chosen. And this is like each kind of seed produces its own body. Now, think about a corn kernel. When you plant it, if you've never seen a corn plant, how similar is it? Not. Couldn't guess, couldn't figure it out, couldn't anything. However, is the plant still derived from the kernel? What I'm trying to help you see is, even though this present body is like the corn kernel, it doesn't mean that the resurrected body, that the glorious body we eventually have, is somehow not us anymore, or somehow not derived from who we are. It is still us, it is still who we are. Again, as John said, what we shall be, what we're specifically going to look like, we don't know, but it's still us. It's not like we get there and go, wow, where am I? What's going on? Who are you? Remember in 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul talks about the great hope of of eternal life is being with who? Who are we going to be with that we're looking forward to being with in 1 Thessalonians 4? It's not complicated. Well, obviously being with God and Jesus. But in 1 Thessalonians 4, the emphasis is on being with who? Us being together. He said, don't sorrow about those who've fallen asleep in Christ. Don't sorrow as others sorrow. You sorrow, but not as others sorrow, as if you have no hope. And all of that text is about the fact that we will be reunited and we will see each other again. We are going to get there and we are going to know and recognize those of our group, Dwayne and David and all the others who have passed away since that time. We're going to know them. And we're looking forward to joining them and being with them. I've been amazed over the years the number of Christians who have read that text many a times and yet ask me the question, are we going to know each other? There's a 3-letter word for that. Duh. Come on. Of course. Absolutely. It's one of the great hopes that we have. We're going to know each other. And it's always interesting to me just to think about how we may reminisce of things we did and what we did together and all that. Our brains are working at this point to cause us to be transformed mentally and what we do and how we live into what we will be as the bride of Christ. It's not like we can just live like a dog and the Lord's going to all of a sudden go, okay, boy, were you terrible. Now I'll transform you. No, we're supposed to be transformed right now. And that's why we need to work hard in doing what we talked about this morning, abiding in His Word so that we see Him more clearly, draw close to Him, and that is transformation for us. That's how that works. Questions? Comments? How we doing? All right? All right, so then going on to verse 39. He says, for not all flesh is the same, but there is one kind for humans, another for animals, another for birds, another for fish. There are heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is of one kind, the glory of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars, for star differs from star in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable, what is raised is imperishable. In other words, that little analogy there, he's just saying, if you look around, there's just all kinds of different bodies. Some are really glorious, some are not so glorious, but there's all kinds of different bodies, and God has ascribed that as He sees. And the resurrection of the dead is the same way. What is sown is not what is raised. It's two different kinds of bodies. Same person, same essence, but two different kinds of bodies. It is sown, you see these contrasts. What is sown into verse 42, what is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. Okay? We're all looking at the perishable right now. We all know. You just look in the mirror and you know full well that's the way it is. I went back to San Diego and preached for people that I had baptized who are now elders, etc., and reestablished a relationship with them. And when I stood up to preach, I said, I don't know what happened to all of you. You all got old. And I just can't figure that out. Obviously, I'm the same. I didn't change a bit, but you're all old. And of course, they threw tomatoes at me. But that's not so, is it? We look at earlier pictures and go, whoa, something terrible has happened. We are perishable. So we're raised imperishable. Another contrast, 43, it's sown dishonor, it's raised in glory. It's sown in weakness. Where's our weakness? We get sick, we get ill, we're vulnerable, we just live on a thread. We die. We can't survive the way it is. But it's raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. Now, this is why I asked the question, when Jesus said, a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see me have. Is that, when He said a spirit doesn't have flesh and bones as you see me have, is that the same thing as a spiritual body that's being spoken of here? Somebody can hum the Jeopardy song. No, I agree. No. That was talking about like a ghost, an apparition, etc. This is something different. This is he calls it later, a heavenly body. In other words, something God made, as opposed to a natural conception and birth. This is a spiritual conception, and God is giving a new body, a glorious body, like the Lord has. So we're not talking about the same thing. And I just say that so that we don't get in our minds this idea of, I'm just going to be a spirit floating around. No, you're going to have a resurrected body that has been, see later in the text, changed into a glorious body. That's the idea. Okay, let's go on, and then any more questions we can. Verse 45, thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. First man, Adam, of course, was Adam in the garden, physical, flesh and blood man, who was a living soul. The last Adam is referring to Jesus here. He sets the tone. He's the one who's raised first. He's already said that earlier in the text. Each is raised in his own order, and Christ is the first fruits. And now he becomes this life-giving spirit. But it is not the spiritual that is first, but the natural, and then the spiritual. Again, difference between natural and spiritual. Natural is natural, fleshly procreation, physical body. Spiritual is God-generated, spiritual body. That's generated by the living and abiding Word of God. Peter says we're born again, and that becomes the seed by which we last forever. All right, verse 46, but it is not the spiritual that is first, but the natural, and then the spiritual. The first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. Okay, when he says from heaven, again, talking about the power that comes from God. This is something we can't do. This is the culmination of our rebirth. In our rebirth, we are transformed now, but eventually, but not yet, transformed into the eventual glorious body that we'll forever be in. Okay? Yeah.
If you go back to Philippians 3,
All right.
I think verse 21, we didn't spend much time on that, especially the second half of that. That he's going to transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body by the power that enables him even to subject all things to himself. I think as we talk about this, part of what I think about is the fact that our body now is corrupted through sin. And part of Christ's body that is different than ours, his physical body, is that he never sinned. So his physical body never faced the corruption that our body faces. That's kind of one idea.
Okay.
But I also think about
Death could not hold him, which would go along with that, right?
And then also in Jeremiah, when we're told that he's going to change us, in all the discussions I was going to write it on our hearts, and we're going to be like him. We always think that about our current life, and I wonder if the combination of that with Philippians 3:21 is actually talking about the body that we're going to be given. The specialness of it is that it's not corrupted by sin. And I think the whole discussion is important because sometimes we think about heaven as this ethereal, mystical, magical, sort of wispy place. And the importance of the fact that we're physical when we're there. It's real. It's not make-believe. It's
Yes.
not a dreamy kind of wavy place
Right.
that you'd see in a movie or something.
Yeah, movies have messed us up.
I know. It is a real place where we will be real people and we will be physical there.
Yeah.
It's not
Not flesh and blood, but I know what you mean when you say physical. Not flesh and blood, however it is, but certainly real and actual and a body. And he refers to the body, whether before death or after the resurrection, it's still a body. And he emphasized that. 2 Corinthians 5, he talks of it in terms of we're now in this earthly tent, but soon put the tent off and take on a building from God. We're going to have a building, and it's going to be a difference between something temporary like a tent to something that is eternal in the heavens. That's then that difference. Okay, very good. All right, and then we see in verse 48, as was the man of the dust, so also are those who are of the dust, and as is the man of heaven, so also are those who are of heaven. Man of heaven, again, Jesus. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall also bear the image of the man of heaven. However, and don't pay attention to these paragraph divisions here. However, verse 50, he says, I tell you this, brothers, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. So these Corinthians are thinking they're going to get the all that is all. They're going to get the glory, glory, glory while they're in this physical body. And he says, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. You and I are in the kingdom. We have not received the inheritance. All through the Bible, and Adams references this when he refers to Jeremiah, all through the Bible there is a now but not yet. There's an attaining of somewhat now, but not yet all. Paul refers to it as the first fruits of the Spirit in Romans 8. Or in Ephesians, he talks about the earnest of the Spirit, or the guarantee of the Spirit, or the down payment of the Spirit, depending on your version. And so we're getting some now, but the not yet is haven't inherited the kingdom, so we receive the full inheritance yet. And that's what he's referring to. So it's not flesh and blood as he refers to now. So the glorious body, we get out of our minds some kind of just making this flesh and blood body impervious to illness or sickness or all this. Boom. It's a glorious body. It's not flesh and blood. There's not going to be blood coursing through our veins anymore and flesh like we have right now. All right? So far, so good. I could say that if it was just a good thing I got this wrist fixed, as I hate to gone through eternity with a bad wrist. We don't want that. All right? Okay. So verse 51, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. Who's the all? Well, Christians, whether dead or alive. The dead have to be changed just like the living, as he says in verse 52. How quickly will it happen? Verse 52. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead shall be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. We're raised with our body. That's resurrection. But boom, in a moment, in an instant, we are changed into that glorious body. And verse 53, the reason we have to be changed is this perishable body must put on imperishable. What body? The body that is now resurrected has to put on the imperishable. And that's where the change is. This mortal must put on immortality. When the perishable puts on imperishable and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying, it is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? All right, so the perishable puts on the imperishable. And no more of the weakness, no more of the dust, no more of the flesh and blood as we would know it. None of those things, but a real body. All right. Garden of Eden, sin comes, man fails, death comes, etc. Everything from then on is about restoration. You remember when Peter said that in his sermon in Acts 3? He said that when Jesus is taken to heaven, he's gone to heaven and will remain until the restoration of all things. How many things are going to be restored? All things are going to be restored, not just us. It's a restoration of all things. Now, quickly go over where I know just going to be a minute out of time here, but Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. And notice beginning at verse 18. Paul says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. What's waiting for our revealing? The creation. Why would the creation be like that? For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in pains of childbirth until now, but not only, verse 23, and not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit. For that's all of us. We've all had the first fruits of the Spirit. We're all groaning and waiting inwardly, eagerly waiting for the adoption of sons, the redemption of our bodies. When sin took place in the garden, did the world change? Everything started dying. Everything was different. Weeds grew. Everything changed. The world became itself corrupted. All right? So, what does Revelation 21 tell us? As we conclude, I've mentioned this a few times in recent sermons. Revelation 21, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I want you simply to see how similar that is to us. Are we going to have this body, or is this body going to be destroyed, dying, corrupted, gone, and a brand new body? Exactly. Not a new us, still us, but a brand new body. What's going to happen with the heavens and the earth, the universe? It's all going to melt, burn up, and God's going to bring a brand new heavens and new earth. The sea is no more. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, that's us, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared. I'm suggesting here our preparation is a heavenly preparation. We are being formed and prepared for our bridegroom. Coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband, heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell among them. They will be his people, and God himself will be their God, wiping away every tear from the eyes. There's into verse 4, the former things have passed away. And he even goes on to say that he makes all things new. In chapter 22. So everything changes. Everything is brand new in this new heavens and new earth. Questions or comments? Say, I thought we were going to heaven. Heaven's coming to us. Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And where's Jesus going to be? Dwelling with us. Where's God going to be? Dwelling with us. What's heaven? Where God is. Wherever God is. But we are prepared by him, and he's making this brand new place. And instead of being away from us, he's in the new garden, the new paradise with us. Now, I know we think about that and we say, well, I don't want to be on this earth. You're not on this earth. Well, I don't be in an earth like this. Well, it's not any more than this body is like the glorious body. It's not what we're talking. It's not what he's talking about. And that's what we need to recognize here, that what he's preparing for us, he is preparing basically as a new, you want to call it heavenly realm? Fine. Whatever. But is as Abraham was looking for, he was looking for a heavenly city. We sometimes just think of, I'm going to go to heaven. Actually, that's not what he says. There's a restoration that's taking place. Everything is changed. Everything is restored. Everything is brand new. And we cannot imagine it except to say, well, if this heavens and earth that I'm looking at, and we look through telescopes and all this, we say, oh, wow, that is just amazing. All you who have been to Maui, you say, oh, I'm sorry you missed Maui. Well, I'm looking for something a whole lot better than Maui. Besides, San Diego was fun. So that's, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's absolutely gorgeous. But it doesn't really matter because something new is being made that will be unlike this. Questions, comments? You're all up to date. What more will we discover in the Scriptures? That's as up to date as I know, right there. Okay. All right, we're going to sing a song. So glad that you're here. enjoyed talking about this with you. There's other questions that I still have on hold from the question box, and look forward to that. And so we'll plan on more of that. I think I'm up next Sunday night as well, and we will do that. Let's stand and sing.